Welcome to part 4 of the Dog Gym Training Foundation module, where we're going to be looking at how to get the most out of training by setting training sessions up in the right way. When setting up a training session, the fundamental question a handler should ask themselves is, am I setting myself up to fail? What I mean by this is, are there factors which I could control now, like removing distractions for example, which if left unchanged could get in the way of the dog learning the task I'm trying to teach? First things first, when looking at starting a training session, it's important to identify what it is you want to teach the dog. Is the task a simple task, such as a position change like sit, or is it more complex, like asking the dog to sniff a smell, then search for the same smell somewhere in a complex environment, return back to the handler when the smell has been located, indicate to the handler they found it, and then show the handler where that smell is? Thinking about the task in this way will have a bearing on how to teach the task. A more complicated task will need to be broken down into small, easy to teach chunks. Now the handler has identified what the task is, a suitable place needs to be identified. The correct environment is important for a number of reasons. The handler should ask themselves whether the environment is safe, free from distractions, and large enough to teach the task. It's no good trying to teach a dog to stay if they're surrounded by other playing dogs and rich interesting smells or bowls of food, for example. This would be like trying to teach a child to eat their greens at a dinner table set in a sweet shop while their favourite programme's on the television. Distractions need to be fully considered before starting out a training session. Handlers should consider whether they will be interrupted during the training. Is the location regularly used by other dog walkers, cyclists or local wildlife? And it would be probably best to avoid such locations in order to prevent yourself from failing. Unless of course the handler is teaching the dog to ignore distractions, which is something that you should build up slowly at first and only when the dog has consistently shown that it can achieve the task without those distractions. If the task is related to the dog's scenting ability, then consideration should also be given to wind direction, wind strength, barriers to wind direction, and temperature and geographic features. You can find out more about setting up scent tasks in the scent discrimination training module. A suitable training location should be one free from distractions, where the dog is comfortable in the environment, and so remember, increased stress reduces that ability to learn. Other distractions to consider are the dog's physical needs. If you're trying to train a puppy to sit and it needs to relieve itself, then it may show signs of increased anxiety, particularly if it's been told off for toileting in the house previously. And in this emotional state, it's less likely to be able to learn. Allow the dog time to acclimatise to the training environment. A common mistake made by many people when trying to teach their dog recall is arriving at the local park, letting the dog off the lead, and then immediately calling them back. Unless the handler has an amazing bond with their dog, or the dog is anxious to be away from the handler, calling the dog back immediately in this way is not likely to generate a positive outcome for the handler or the dog. So, before attempting to train, let the dog sniff around and do its own thing. Let it be a dog before trying to train it. Make sure you're prepared before commencing the training session. Are there enough rewards? Are the rewards the correct value? And see the sessions on rewards for more information about this. Are those rewards easy to get to? And I would recommend a treat pouch for easy access to your treats. The last thing you want to do is be faffing around in your pockets trying to find treats. Finally, the handler should be in the right frame of mind before commencing training sessions. If you've had a busy day at work and are tired and stressed, it's probably a good idea to relax a bit or just go for a walk with the dog before attempting any training. The same can be said for the dog. It's no good trying to train a dog as soon as you get home from work if they've been left on their own all day and they're full of energy. Once a suitable location has been found, the handler is ready for the training session to begin, and they have a plan in mind of how to carry out the training. It's time to begin. We've already touched on how dogs learn via association and positive and negative outcomes, but something we haven't mentioned yet is generalisation. Have you ever wondered why, when you think your dog has learned to sit on command and you try to show off when visiting friends or family, that your dog doesn't perform so well? The reason for this is that most dogs don't generalise very well. What this means is that if too many variables change in the training environment, the dog may not understand what it is that's being taught. So, for example, if you always train your dog to sit on the rug in the front room with others in the room during your favourite TV show, for example, if you then ask them to sit in the garden, in the rain, at night, while a cat wanders by, they're unlikely to understand what you're asking of them, because as far as they understood, that body language sign and sit command is what you do when you want them to sit on the mat inside. This is the main cause I see for handlers to get upset with their dog. I regularly hear my customers say, "He can do this at home, I don't understand what's the matter." This is usually followed by the handler telling off their dog and making the whole experience more unpleasant, thereby increasing anxiety and reducing the learning ability. So it's important to be consistent. Use the same body language sign, the same vocal tone when speaking commands. Try to keep the environment the same, and in this way the dog will learn the task being taught more easily. Take a moment now to look at the next slide and see if you can identify all of the different types of variables. You might want to press the pause button to help you do this. Now you've identified some of those, have a look again now when those variables all change. By identifying variables in this way and trying to keep them the same at first will speed up the learning process. Of course, it's also important that our dogs are able to perform the tasks in all different environments. So to achieve this, handlers need to recognise the issue of poor generalisation and gradually change variables one at a time. In practice, this should look similar to this. Teaching a dog to sit, note the probable variables. There may be more subtle ones in reality, such as the clothes you are wearing or a dog may be wearing, the tone of the voice you use, the body language you use, the location, including floor surface texture, view from the dog's perspective, walls, doors, windows, etc. The weather, including visibility and wind strength, the level of lighting, and the number and type of different distractions that may be there. Keep the variables all the same until the dog is performing the task of sitting consistently. Now change one of the variables, for example the location, e.g. move from the living room to the kitchen. Now retrain the dog to sit in the new location and repeat this until it consistently performs to sit on command. It's important here to not test the dog. Step back and reteach the command. If you want to have a look later at some of the modules on basic obedience, that might help. Once the dog is consistently performing the task in the new location, change another variable. For example, introduce a distraction such as another person, and again retrain the sit. I say retrain. What we don't want to be doing is practicing and testing the dog. What we want to be doing is teaching the dog how to do the sit in that given location, so using a treat and getting the dog to sit for it. By gradually changing the variables in this way, the dog's ability to perform the desired task, in this example it's a sit, in all the different circumstances, environments, will be much more improved. Finally, don't get upset with your dog when they don't perform a task. Think first, has there been too many variables change, and is my dog struggling to understand what it is I'm asking of them? Remember here, consistency is key. In order to teach dogs more complex tasks, it's beneficial to simplify them as much as possible. For example, if the handler wants the dog to sit, wait on the spot while the handler walks away from the dog, and then recall the dog to the handler's side, all off the lead. Each element needs to be looked at and trained. This can be done separately. In fact, it's easier this way. and it doesn't need to be in order of the final task. So in this example, the training sessions should look at the following elements: sit, wait for a length of time, wait at a distance from the handler, recall, touch, which helps to give the dog a target to return to, and then heel, walking next to the handler. Once the dog is consistently demonstrating it can do each element of the final task, the tasks can then slowly be put together bit by bit. For more complex tasks, stringing a few tasks together at the same time and then finally piecing the whole thing together. By training in this way, complex tasks can be achieved with little fuss. From the dog's perspective, it's just conducting each learned task but one at a time, and in order to consolidate the complex task, it is, of course, as previously mentioned, it's important to practice in all different environments before the handler can finally declare that the dog is fully trained to do the complex task. Now we're going to look at keeping a record. I have to confess, I'm not the best at keeping records or logbooks, but I do recognise the importance of recording training sessions. Having someone video you while you're teaching your dog helps you to progress the training significantly more quickly. Looking back on a video is a great way to see what it is that went wrong or what went well, and so that you can then build on that. You can see how you're holding your body posture, how the dog's reacting to you, and where you can make those improvements. Keeping a logbook which records details such as the location, variables such as the weather, the lighting conditions, the type of terrain, for example, what the training session was intended to achieve, how the dog reacted to the training, is all a great way of recording your progress, and it's really useful when coming up against problems which have resurfaced. A quick flick back through a logbook can show you what changes you made to rectify those issues previously. If you're training your dog to search for something in a complex environment, then it's also useful to use a GPS device which records both yours and your dog's tracks. It's important here to add the wind direction to these if you're training your dog to use its nose. And by doing this, you can identify whether the coverage of an area was adequate or not, and it's a great way of identifying whether search strategies worked. Thank you for listening. Next up is part 5, keeping your dog entertained.